If you want to heal other people, this is the healing to start with. Now there is another way, and we all know this. I mean, what I'm telling you, probably half the people in the room could sit up here and tell us the same thing. So we're just kind of reminding ourselves, yes, don't forget, don't run away today. Oh, thank you, I appreciate your opinion. Yes. It's that simple. It's really very basic. At the same time, it's really hard. I've spent years in meditation, in therapy, in body work, doing service work of different kinds, and I still see how powerful is the habit of fear and aversion and running away in certain ways. It takes real love and devotion to do it. I'll tell you a story. There was a day in which I was leading a big meditation retreat at the center that some friends and I started in Massachusetts. And it was the last morning in which we do a group loving kindness meditation. So the bell was ringing and it was time for me to come in and lead this meditation on loving kindness. Well, it just so happened that about 10 minutes before I received a phone call from my girlfriend at that time. This was some years ago, before I got married. And we were in one of those difficult periods, you might say. And she said a number of things to me that I thought were more than unjust. And we really got into it. How could you say that? And you did this, well, but you did that for it, and we were into it. And then the bell is ringing, time for loving kindness meditation. So I come into the meditation hall, and there's, 100 people sitting, waiting for Jack to come up and do the loving kindness meditation. And I sit down, I close my eyes, I follow your breath and become present just here, let go of the past and future. And then, first begin with love for yourself. Now think of someone you love a lot, in this very sweet voice. And I was feeling it some. And then there's a space. I give everybody time to do that. And this other voice comes in and it said, when I'm done this meditation, I'm going to call her back and tell her this, this, and this. Now think of another person you love a lot and bring them into your heart. And this voice comes, that bitch, if she doesn't... Now extend your love further. And I just watched. It was wonderful to see this dance. What do we do with the angry or the greedy or the judgmental mind? Get away, I don't like you either. So we're at war. There is another way. But if we want to do it, if we want to do this healing work, we have to discover or find that courage to let go. And that courage really means that we have to be certain of our capacity to love, that we really can do it. Mostly in my work these days, I used to see a lot of greed and anger and desire and all kinds of neurotic things. That's what I used to look at. Mostly in my work these days, I only see one thing. I see fear. That's really what's at the bottom of everything I see. People are afraid. Afraid to feel, afraid to be here, afraid to open in some way. So do we have that capacity? There's a story of Mullah Nasruddin, the Sufi wise man and fool and whatever. He goes into a bank one day to cash a check. And they say, could you please identify yourself? So he reaches in his pocket and pulls out a mirror and says, yep, that's me all right. We have very limited views of ourselves, which we learned basically from some other place. We have ideas, I'm this person or that, I have only this capacity. We create our sense of self out of ideas. There is a different reality, and it's not there through some fantastic altered state spiritual hoobly-gooble. It's really a very practical and immediate reality. There is a capacity that we have of our being, of our hearts. It's called the greatness of heart that we can discover that can live from a place of openness. We can really do it. This is Martin Luther King. And he had real great difficulties. This was in the middle of the difficult, people were being bombed and killed and whatever. He said, we will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. We will not hate you, but we cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws. but we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And in winning our freedom, we will so appeal to your heart and conscience that we will win yours in the process. Isn't that a line? We will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer. He's somebody who stood on his death. He stood right in the center of death and suffering and said, there's a greater reality than this. To do this, to see all of the things that we've struggled with and instead come to a place of letting go, requires a very deep forgiveness. That's really what's asked of us. Forgiveness doesn't mean you condone it. If somebody rapes somebody or murders or something, you don't say, well, I forgive you, that's terrific that you did it. It doesn't condone at all. You might take very strong action and say, that's terrible, that must never happen again. We will do what's necessary to ensure it. And forgiveness is there anyway. And in the end, one finds forgiveness. Why should one forgive? Because the person that you don't forgive, is off having a vacation in Hawaii, and you're here not forgiving, and who's suffering? That's one reason why. Because who does it help or harm? Secondly, the third Zen patriarch said, if you want to awaken into the Tao, the way of enlightenment, you must be without anxiety about non-perfection. It's not perfect, it never has been, and it never will be. Or as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross puts it, I'm not okay and you're not okay, and that's okay. Right? Forgiveness means that life is the way it is rather than the way we wanted it to be. And that doesn't mean that we can't offer our love and service to create beauty in it, but it is the way that it is. We look for perfection in the wrong place. There's only one place to find perfection, I promise you. Mullah Nasruddin was asked at one point, did you ever think of marrying by a friend who was nervous about getting married? I know none of you have experienced that in your life, but anyway. And he said, well, I thought of it and I went in search of the perfect wife. And I went to Damascus and I found this woman and she was physically beautiful and deep spiritual nature, but she was really incompetent in the world. And I went to Isfahan and I found this woman who was gracious and spiritually deep and physically beautiful, fine, really connected with the world, but we didn't communicate so well. And then I went off to Cairo and I found her. She was beautiful and gracious and deeply spiritual and just perfect in every way. And the friend said, so, did you get married? And he said, well, unfortunately there was one problem. She was looking for the perfect husband. It's not to be found. I promise you. With our perfection in mind, we are so hard on ourselves and others. Half of meditation practice is simply self-acceptance. I mean, I do retreats, 3-month retreats for 100 people. Do you know what people do for a lot of that 3 months? Self-acceptance. And they don't want to do it. I'll accept this much, but not. Forgiveness. Does this make sense to you? And without that, how can you love another person? A poem from my friend Ed Brown, and then we'll do our next meditation, okay? He's a Zen teacher and a cook. He wrote the Tassajara bread book and the Tassajara cookbook and so forth. He says, and still we cook. At any moment, preparing this meal, we could be gassed 30,000 feet in the air, soon to fall out poisonous on leaf, frond, and fur, everything in sight, obliterated, deceased. And still we cook, putting 1,000 cherished dreams on the table to nourish and reassure those close and dear. In this act of cooking, I bid farewell. Always I insisted you alone were to blame. This last instant, my eyes open, and I regard you with all the tenderness and forgiveness I withheld for so long. With no future, we have nothing to fight about. May all beings be happy. This last instant my eyes open and I regard you with all the tenderness and forgiveness I withheld for so long. Don Juan says to Carlos Castaneda, the trouble with you is you think you have time. It's really an extraordinary line. You think, I'll do it tomorrow, next year. To awaken is to do it when? Is to do it now.